Good morning. It is close to 11 UTC, going through Bitcoin and some market updates. So, big thing today, Tuesday. It is a national holiday in Japan. Not that it's the biggest thing for us, but it's definitely something global liquidity wise to think of. We also have Powell speaking today. He's testifying before Congress about half an hour after the U.S. market opens, both today and tomorrow. So, just keep an eye on that. If he says something wild. Going into Wednesday, that's kind of the most important thing here is about an hour before the market opens on Wednesday, we're going to start getting CPI data. So that's gonna be a big deal. Definitely a potential market shaker if the forecast doesn't meet the actual. And then Thursday, same thing, initial jobless and PPI, and then Friday, same thing, retail sales coming in as well. So I'm expecting an increase in pre-market and market open volatility going into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just based off of those things. Going over to Bitcoin specifically, looking at some long short data. Big things that stand out to me are that we're actually coming down still pretty aggressively. We're now under 60% long to short. Still majority long to short. That's still the big key here. So we've seen that kind of route as we've actually gained some local levels. Actually looks a little bit of a change of structure. We were seeing change in character yesterday, and now we're seeing a break of some downside structure with some good support to hold us. So as this comes down, it just means we have more chance of going up to grab stuff, and there is stuff to do above us, especially close to 100K and potentially higher. Looking at the aggregate order book liquidity delta, we do have some localized pressure pushed us down basically from the local high at 98.5. That's starting to come off really aggressively, so this is good. If we're going to have some continuation on the upside, we want to see, shorts coming off both on spot and perpetual, as well as establishing support. There's some good stuff to do back at like 98K where we're at now, and then even lower at 97.5, where we want to see some nice holds of level with some key high time frame structures there. So also looking over at the funding rates are pretty neutral across the board. BitMEX at its standard, Binance at its standard. The rest of them, OKX, Bybit, relatively low on the USDT margin. OKX is pretty high on the token margin, but in general, pretty neutral. So not a massive amount of downside pressure from that side either. Looking at the order book here, just on the actual depth, the two key points on the upside really stick out to me. 100K, we've got a pretty large order resting right here, just shy of 100K to potentially front run it. That'd be a first kind of target if we do have some local gains that start pushing us back up towards that. And then the big one really comes into play at 101. So just shy of 101, call it 101. 100.9K. We have pretty large orders stacking in, which we can see pretty clearly above us here on the liquidity order book heat map. So big, decent one on 100K, nothing crazy. But the really big one is up at 109, 101. I think this is still fake. It doesn't feel the same to me, just because it's two massive orders that are just kind of sitting there, potentially acting as a magnet. I would expect those to get pulled and not filled entirely, just because the depth around that is quite low. Below us, we do have pretty good depth in general. It's not as thick as at those points, but the plunge protection has started coming in pretty aggressively late last night, down at 91. So that seems to be the local low to definitely hold until going higher. But overall, yeah, nothing too crazy to say in the local stuff. You got a little bit of pressure here, just long pressure locally. So we should see a bit of a turn up as long as this local stuff holds. Looking at the whale orders and large trades, so we saw a big thing pop in earlier this morning, just a couple hours ago, about 5 hours ago, 6 hours ago. We're at some local large orders that were resting to kind of push price down. We'll see how those react as we come back up to it. But like I said, the stuff at 100K is definitely still in place. That's going to be the big one. And then the next one after that, 101, it's not as thick, with 102 being kind of a bigger key level in general. But still, there's some upside pressure, definitely. We've got some good levels to hold us below, and we'd like to see that kind of continuation as we squeeze out some of the late shorts. Finally, looking at the liquidation heat map, the one thing I will say, this is going over the last 2 weeks, sub 95K is definitely going to happen still. I still feel that is going to be the case. 94.5, grabbing this big liquidity back at the lows we did from last Monday. But to the upside right now, we're actually pretty good on liquidations going back to 99.5, 99K even is pretty decent. And it checks a lot of boxes because we would effectively test some upside structure. Clearing 100K, that's when it gets interesting. If we are able to flip 100K, because it is a bit of a liquidity dead zone on the higher time frame, there's decent liquidity that could easily break us back to 102, potentially even back up to 104, 104.5. I would expect that if we do have some kind of major continuation, that 102 and then 104 to 105 is really the next two kind of key points if we have some localized gains. And then again, if we lose the local stuff, we break back below 97K, I would say that's the local sweep to retest the lows that we were doing from yesterday. So anyways, throw it all together, put it onto the chart so we can all see. General game plan on this zone, pretty much the same. 4 hours actually looks really aggressive. We've actually broken a high here. This is a really key close. This is the first time we've effectively tested a 4-hour high in a long time. If you look to the left of us, all of these structures are fully tested. There's nothing left to test. Same thing as to the downside. The only thing really left to test is down at like 93 and then lower potentially. So we're at some localized resistance. We've got some good support coming in from the previous weekly open where we want to see bullish back tests. Same thing as the daily. If we start flipping the daily, that's at 97, call it 97.3. That'd be the first failure that breaks us back down towards 96.5. Until then, you've got some upside priority. You've got it working in your favor, and that's kind of the direction of travel that we're all really looking for. So going a bit lower time frame as well. Yeah, you've lost some local structure just in the upside drive, but it's still looking quite healthy and strong. We've got a lower time frame support structure coming in from the daily open at 97.3 all the way down to these wick structures, where if you look at the wicks here, that's always a good sign for demand, for support, for buying back. So in general, it looks still relatively good. It starts to get worse progressively if you lose the daily open to then target lower. Until that happens, you're probably looking for a continuation move, and with the clear invalidation of losing the daily, which should likely break you back to the downside. So big things here are kind of like macro play. I'm still kind of in the park of I'd rather go up first than down, in the sense that a lot of people who didn't get chopped out badly last week, a lot of the lower leverage guys, are still in place. So where I'm really looking for reactions regarding that, I'm looking at probably somewhere, at the 1 hour swing 98.7 or potentially 99.6, 99.7. That's about the last point I look for a failure, or at least a nice profit target on the local upside. If we start clearing this stuff, we are going to 102. I think I don't see a point at stop. I think we'll stop at 101 very quickly just to like retest that, but then eventually we'll go back up to 102. The higher time frame here is what's concerning, in the sense that if we do this move, a lot of boxes get checked. So regardless of what we do now, if we come back up towards 102, are we really breaking the macro structure since we're down on the month? No. I think that's an immediate reaction we'll have at the February open. If we come back up to 104, 105, things become like really important to hold, because otherwise we'll look at something like this and we'll have the final capitulation move is likely the upside happen. To flip it, to truly gain a directional flip to go back to the upside, you need any bullish backtest after you come back to 102 to be something like this, where you actually start squeezing back up towards the all-time high. And then you talk about a potential all-time high short squeeze to new all-time highs. But realistically, I think we're still in the danger zone of going much below 90K. That goes out the window if we start regaining monthly level, February, regaining some of the local structure. But until then, I'm looking locally priority up. What's the clear invalidation to flip my bias? Yep, lose the daily. If you lose the daily, really simply, then I'm just looking for a nice little breakdown, come back to the weekly open. We kind of decide if we're going to hold that. That's about as deep as I'd want to see a hold. Otherwise, we run the risk of going lower. And realistically, the step off from that should be the next move back up to retest stuff if we do that first. So in general, it looks good. I think everyone's getting really FUD and fearful. I'd love to have a nice, big, strong drive to the upside going into some of these data points, and then we potentially start nuking as if potentially bad data comes through. So that's that. Take it easy, and I will catch you all tomorrow.